don't negotiate with your ally by threats of force. It's very, very troublesome for most of us. And I served in NATO, right? These guys are our friends. And it really bothers a lot of us. I think it's a negotiating tool. However, the fact that they've said it every day, we got to respond to it.
Republicans are now joining Democrats to stop Trump from going to war against NATO. This is where we're at in 2026.
And I think it would be the end of the administration. It would be. I mean, I think, well, right now, polls show 9% of the people support that. 9. If you do the math. The thing with Greenland is appalling. They are in NATO. They govern themselves, so they're under the protection of Denmark. Denmark's a NATO ally. We used to have 5 bases in Greenland. We have 1 right now. Greenland would welcome our friendly requests to have more basing rights there, to do more mining and economic investment in Greenland. They would love that. But threatening Greenland is counterproductive. It's counterproductive to Denmark. And by the way, all the European countries see it and they hate it. And these are our allies. NATO is the best alliance in the history of mankind.
This, quote, peace president has systematically destroyed our natural alliances step by step this year. The latest, NATO. Something you would never have thought would happen except under Trump in 2026. So much so that there is now congressional legislation, a bill introduced in the House called the Stop the Funding of the NATO Invasion Act. Yes, a real title of a bill. Republican Don Bacon helped introduce this bill along with Democrats. This is how scared people are of Trump trying to take over Greenland militarily. Now, Bacon's district did vote Harris, but he's resigning at the end of this term. So he's not necessarily doing it because he wants to get reelected and he realizes his constituents would vote him out. He's perhaps doing it because his constituents actually don't want to go to war with NATO like the rest of America. Now, this is a very interesting way of approaching this and different than the bill that's going forward with the Senate. The Senate is trying to come up with a bill to limit any further military action in Venezuela without specific congressional approval because, as we know, any president is now not allowed to start a war without Congress under the Constitution. But this House bill specifically targets the money, which under Trump, Republicans, it is always about following the money. And they are saying that no funds can be used, no federal money, specifically federal money, can be used for any military action in Greenland, which basically takes away this idea that Trump has to seek approval. If this passes, it would mean that even if Trump doesn't seek approval, it automatically would be illegal for him to use federal funding, which would make it much easier to stop because anybody can try to enforce a new federal law. It wouldn't take the rest of us in America counting on the Republicans to suddenly act, which we see they're unable to act. So this novel approach is actually a way of trying to slow down Trump and could very well work. The other thing that this specifically says is that any officer, any military officer that follows an order to militarily invade Greenland, this would be an unlawful order. Interestingly, of course, this coming at a time, as we know, the Pentagon trying to investigate Senator Mark Kelly for his announcement, his public service announcement, essentially, that he made to officers saying, you're not allowed to follow illegal orders. This bill makes it specific that it would be illegal to essentially follow an order to go into Greenland. So a novel approach that is getting bipartisan support, trying to slow this down in this crazy way that Trump is trying to destroy yet another alliance of ours, and perhaps the most important alliance that has kept this world safe and secure post-World War II.
Do you think President Trump's Greenland threats are part of a broader effort within the administration to dismantle NATO, something that he has talked openly about?
Well, they surely undervalue NATO. Now, one of the things that stands out at me is there's a lot of talk about United States should control the Western Hemisphere, spheres of influence. Europe and Russia, you guys can fight it out. in Europe, and China will have, the Asia sphere of influence. Well, this is 1800s type of thinking, and it went away in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. And after World War II, we realized spheres of influence, we're better than that. America is the leader of the free world. We can't do it by ourselves. We've got to have good friends. We can't counter Russia, China, Iran on our own. But with our allies, we can.
Do you want Stephen Miller to lose his job?
Look, either Stephen Miller needs to get into a lane where he knows what he's talking about or get out of his job. Look, the reason why I thought it was important for me to make a comment on the floor is I've been the Republican leader of the Senate NATO Observer Group since 2018. There is no more important alliance than the NATO alliance. And Denmark has punched above its weight. It came to Afghanistan, lost 43 soldiers on the ground, fought in some of the most contested regions, honoring their Article 5 commitment to the United States.
I think they lost more soldiers than any other country per capita.
Per capita, they did. And Jake, they were in among the NATO allies at the time. It was 30 nations. They were among the top 6. And think about all the nations bigger than them. So to have the Prime Minister suggest that they have to be prepared for some sort of action by the United States suggests to me that Mr. Miller does not know anything about the alliance, the importance of it. And, generals, I was on Senate Armed Services for 8 years, and generals would always say the same thing. The only thing worse than going to war with allies is going to war without allies. This alliance is critically important. Shaking that alliance sends a signal to Putin that he's winning, and Stephen Miller doesn't represent the U.S. government. He represents the Article 2 branch, and I, as a member of the U.S. Senate, get to weigh into this issue, and I know, whether they say it out loud or not, most of my colleagues agree with me.
Now, Ted Cruz, back in 2016, actually predicted that Trump might do this, might try to invade Greenland. This is when he was trying to become president. Of course, we've seen him change his stripes to 360, and now he's a yes man for Trump. This just shows that the Republicans, not only do they not maybe agree with Democrats on basic fundamental policies, but they're so willing to change their values and their principles just to stay in power. Take a listen to what Ted Cruz had to say about what Trump would do back in 2016.
I don't know anyone who would be comfortable with someone who behaves this way having his finger on the button. I mean, we're liable to wake up one morning and Donald, if he were president, would have nuked Denmark. That's not the temperament of a leader to keep this country safe. We need a president who will have the back of our fighting men and women, who will have their back and will be clear-eyed and focused on our enemies, on radical Islamic terrorism, and on defeating ISIS. That's what I will do every day. And the American people are not interested in this circus sideshow of insults.
President-elect Trump will be meeting with Senate Republicans in Washington as your party begins laying out legislative priorities. Of course, chief among them, the economy, tackling inflation, front and center in those discussions. As you well know, America's biggest trade partner is Canada, a longtime ally. President-elect Trump keeps talking about making it the 51st state. Joke or not, is there a danger in upsetting allies like Canada who may decide to send their products elsewhere?
Well, listen, this is actually a topic that I discussed at great length in today's podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, and I discussed Canada and Panama and Greenland, all of which President Trump have discussed. And I view those on a continuum. With respect to Canada, I think the president is basically trolling Canada. I don't think anyone thinks that there's a realistic prospect that Canada will become part of the United States. But I will say it was an epic troll, and I actually think on the merits there are very strong reasons why that makes sense for the United States. Geopolitically, Greenland's location on the Arctic is incredibly important to contribute to the defense of the United States. If, God forbid, we were ever in a military conflict with Russia or China, any ICBMs would come over the Arctic targeting the United States. Greenland is ideally situated to defend America. On top of that, Greenland also has vast resources of critical earth and rare earth minerals that are essential for semiconductors, for electronics, for military equipment.
But Greenland at this point is not for sale. So why stake that as such a top priority?
Well, because anything can be not for sale until it suddenly is. Denmark right now controls Greenland. And I have to tell you, yesterday, Donald Trump Jr. traveled up to Greenland, visited with people there. I got to say, if you're a Greenlander, the possibility of becoming an American, of becoming an American territory, of getting the benefits of being an American, that is very enticing.